All right, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome you guys to Gladney University. We are so excited to have you guys online today. As you can kind of imagine, we are not doing in-person trainings right now. We are continuing to work from home and be virtual as we're keeping people safe, ourselves and our family and everybody else in our community. We are so excited to have Katia Gonzalez from Alliance for Children. She is going to talk about how we can keep children safe from abuse during this pandemic, and we're so excited to have her. First, I want to go over some housekeeping rules. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask those in the chat or the questions area of your little taskbar. We will answer those at the end. At the end, if you don't want to talk, we'll unmute everybody, but if you don't want to talk and ask your question, just make sure you have it in that chat or that question bubble over on your taskbar. We will also be giving away CEUs, so if you need that, there will be a link in the chat for you to fill out a questionnaire, and once you've done that, we will get you your CEU certificate within the next few days or so. To the email address that you provided us. If you forgot to tell us what type of CEU you needed, whether that was counseling, social work, or just a certificate of completion, make sure that you email us or let us know in the chat, and we'll make sure to get you the right certificate. We will end right at 2 o'clock, so those of you that may have to go right at 2 o'clock for another appointment or do something, you guys are free to go at 2 o'clock, and then we'll stay on for a few minutes afterwards to answer questions. I think that's all the housekeeping stuff for now, but I want to introduce you guys to Katia Gonzalez. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about her. She started her career in the field of child advocacy in 2010 as an investigator with the Department of Family and Protective Services, where she worked as a part of the multidisciplinary team investigating the most severe allegations regarding sexual and physical abuse, neglect, and child fatalities. In 2015, Katia took a position with Alliance for Children and has served in various roles, dedicating her time to serve the mission of protecting Tarrant County children from child abuse through her efforts in providing prevention education to the community. Katia graduated from Texas Women's University with a degree in child development and family studies. We are so excited to have her. Katia, take it away.
Okay, sounds great. Well, this is so exciting. It's my first time doing a webinar, so it's a little odd just sitting in my living room and talking to myself, but I trust that you guys are here. I can't see myself, so hopefully I'm not making funny faces, but let's go ahead and get started. I'm very excited about this. I know right now is a very stressful and uncertain time for us, and particularly for our children. So I'm just very thankful for this opportunity to spend the next hour with all of you, whoever our audience is today, and just really delve into ways that we can make sure that kids are safe at this time. So before we get started, I just want to share very briefly about Alliance for Children for some of those that might not be familiar of who we are and what we do and why we are in this field talking about child abuse today. So Alliance for Children, we are a children's advocacy center here in Tarrant County, and it's really our job and mission to serve child abuse victims in our community. We do that in a variety of ways, but we're actually the only nonprofit organization that's directly involved in the investigations of child abuse. So when we have cases that really involve a criminal component, so such as sexual abuse or severe physical abuse, witnessing really violent crimes, so anytime that there's a team that's needed to make sure a child is safe and protected, our job at Alliance for Children is, rather than all of these agencies working in silos like Child Protective Services or law enforcement or district attorney's office, our job is to bring all of these teams together to make sure that we're all working cohesively for the best interest of the child. And then in addition to that, we're there for the investigations of child abuse, but long term, we want to make sure that after something really terrible has happened to a child and family, that they're provided with every opportunity to heal. So that is our mission. We also want to make sure that children have less and less need to visit our centers. So for that, we do a lot of prevention education to make sure that kids are protected, which is what we're going to be doing today. So the way that we typically talk about child abuse is a little bit different than what we're talking about today, when we know the circumstances with where children are right now are a little bit different, since they're isolated at home. So just to give you a few statistics about what's happening right now and just kind of overall trends in our community. Last year, we served 5,536 children who were confirmed victims of abuse. And as I just mean as a community, not necessarily Alliance for Children. But one thing I want to point out is if you see here and then your perpetrator's relationship to victims, you'll notice that 5% of perpetrators were actually strangers to the child. Now, the great thing right now is if this was a really higher number, if we saw most abusers were strangers, then we'll know that we'll have a situation right now where children would be safe because a lot of them are not seeing strangers. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is that most perpetrators now and before this whole COVID-19 started are somebody that child intimately knows and has a relationship with. So we know that right now there are a lot of children that are potentially isolated at home with people that might not be safe for them. So just the purpose of this training today is really talk about some ways that we can make sure that those kids are protected. So where we are right now, and I'm sure you guys have seen the news where there's been a lot of media attention as far as the rates of abuse. As potentially as a result of COVID-19. But we know that right now we have children that are isolated at home with their abusers, and they don't have the opportunity to go to school and see safe adults in their lives that might be able to take action. We know that right now families are experiencing a lot of stress. They're isolated at home, particularly with parents that have young children in the home. This can be a very stressful time. And we know a lot of families are facing just the depletion of resources. Some people might be facing loss of jobs, which creates a lot of additional stress. So when we have these conditions, we know that creates some safety risks for just the safety of children in general. Typically, we see that educators are #1 reporters of child abuse because they're properly trained. They see children every day and are that safety line for kids. So right now, children have lost that in some regard. And then for daycare professionals as well. So what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a decrease in the typical child abuse reports that we would be receiving during this time. But at the same time, we're seeing an increase in just the severity of physical abuse cases. So we're seeing an increase in the violence of cases that's happening in our community right now, and even children witnessing violent crimes that are occurring. So with this decrease of cases, we don't believe that it's because abuse is not occurring. We just believe that children are in situations where there are not trusted adults that are making reports to make sure that we're able to intervene. So I know that's kind of very dark information and statistics to hear. I think right now we have 4 fatalities that are being investigated as a potential homicide. So this is a very stressful time for families. On another more positive note, I know that there's a lot of children that are safe at home with their protective caregivers, and this is a great time for protective parents and caregivers to bond with their children. And I also know that our community is very strong. So every day I'm just pleased to be in Tarrant County and seeing all of the great work that's being done. So I don't want this to be a complete doomsday because there are a lot of very positive things that are happening right now. But just the purpose of this training is we're talking about ways that we can keep children safe that are not in safe situations. So let's get started with that. Let's talk about some ways that we can make sure that kids are protected during this time. So here's some. We just created some 5 easy steps. Right now is a really important time to be checking in on children, knowing that they don't have the external resource of educators or child care professionals to see them every day to make sure they're safe. We also want to make sure that we're recognizing abuse that might be occurring and that we're providing support for families that need us. Again, particularly families that might have some additional risk factors in addition to where we are in the country right now. This is also a great time to have conversations with children about personal body safety and encouraging them to let adults know, the adults that they do have in their lives, to let them know if they're feeling unsafe. You know, a lot of kids are also online, so having online safety conversations is really important as well. And this is a particularly important time for us to come together as a community. And if we are suspecting or are just concerned for the safety of a child, we need to make sure that we're making reports so professionals can come in and assess that situation to make sure that kids are safe. So that's really delve into each of these steps. So let's start with checking in on our children. So typically the way that when we talk about prevention education and how we can keep children safe, a lot of the things that we talk about are not things that would be useful during this time when kids are, again, isolated at home and have limited access to the outside world. So we know just traditionally that about 80% of abuse happens in isolated one-on-one situations, which is a lot of times typically kids are at home with their abusers. That's exactly what's happening right now. So normally we would advocate against having one-on-one situations. That might be difficult to do right now. We're also advocate strongly to make sure that adults are not having one-on-one conversations with children via online world, so on social media or texting them or having phone conversations that might be crossing that boundary line. But we know that right now, virtual conversations with children is the best way to check up on them to make sure that they're okay in their environment. So we really have to think creatively about ways that we can adjust kind of some of our safety measures as a community to make sure that kids are protected. So here's some ways that we can do that. So again, very important that we're checking in on families, that we're checking in on children, because we really at this time need additional eyes and ears on children to make sure that that they're doing okay. So it's a very important thing to do. And there are creative ways that we can reach out to children. I know at Alliance for Children, we're continuing to provide services and have found ways to do that virtually. So we're doing telemental health, where we're still doing counseling in a virtual world, so where we're still able to make sure that our kids' needs are provided. So there's ways for us as a community to do that as well. So we all have children in our lives that are in our kind of circle of influence or sphere of protection. So these are the kids that we need to be checking up on. So grandparents, check up on your grandchildren. If you have aunts or uncles, that's a great way to bond with your nieces or nephews right now. It's just really important to do that. So there are a lot of resources and child-friendly ways that we can talk to kids virtually. So I know Facebook Messenger has a way to do that with kids. And you can read that, so I don't have to read that to you. I know teachers are utilizing Google Classrooms to communicate with kids. Skype can be a safe way to have those face-to-face conversations with kids via technology. So there's great ways that we can still make sure that we have eyes on kids. So some things that we can ask children to make sure that they're safe is we really want to stay away from really fishing for information. So we don't want to say things like, are you being abused? Is there somebody that's hurting you at home? So we don't want to ever coach a child to tell us something or put words in a child's mouth that are not theirs. But there are some creative ways and questions that we can ask to make sure that that kids are doing okay. So some things that we can do is just asking very broad questions. How are you doing? How's your family adjusting to this? What are some challenging parts of your day? And by the way, all of these that you read right now came from our therapists that are working with children right now virtually and are making sure that they're okay. So just simply asking things like, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Is there anything you want to talk to me about? Are you feeling safe? So things like that are very important to ask. Just really opening that line of communication and letting that child know that you are a safe adult in their life, or a trusted adult in their life, and if there's anything that's going on, then that you're there for them. So a lot of times when we have children that have felt comfortable enough to make a disclosure that abuse was occurring, it wasn't because somebody asked them like, hey, is somebody abusing you? It was because that they had an adult in their lives that really felt like this person cares for me and they're going to take action and they love me, and this is a safe adult that I can talk to. So if we can really come together as a community with the children that are in your lives and be that safe adult and just really open that door of communication for them, that's the way that we're going to make sure that kids are safe and or feel safe to tell us that something is happening. So just asking those very simple questions is very important. And then take notes if you're having video chats or if you're talking to children on the phone, just pay particular attention to some of their behaviors and just really pay attention to their bodies and see if or to their external environment, if you can see something on the screen, to see if there's any kind of injuries or anything concerning that's happening in their interactions with caregivers or in their environment, or just injuries in their bodies. And if you're seeing something that's concerning, that's an appropriate time to ask some very open-ended questions and even make a report if you feel like that child is unsafe. So when we're talking about behaviors and kind of recognizing that abuse might be occurring, let's talk about how to recognize some of that, some things that might be unsafe. So how to recognize abuse. I'm going to look up my phone for just a second to make sure I have plenty of time. Okay, so when we talk about abuse, we talk about 4 forms of abuse. So we have physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and emotional abuse. So just for the sake of time today, we're going to focus particularly on physical abuse and sexual abuse. So we'll talk about that in a second. But neglect is if you have a situation where children are in a situation or an environment or are with caregivers and they are at substantial risk of harm to where they're not safe in that environment, we need to make sure that we're making reports with that. And with emotional abuse, if we're noticing that any type of treatment by a caregiver results in some sort of mental impairment to the child, that's the definition of emotional abuse. So if we're noticing something like that, we need to make sure that we're taking action with that. But with physical abuse, that is any type of inflicted non-accidental injuries. So that could be marks, bruises, burns. With younger children in particular, we see a lot of internal injuries, so like broken bones or abusive head trauma. That could also include any type of risk of physical abuse. So if caregivers are placing their child in a situation where they're at risk of physical abuse. So for example, domestic violence, if families are fighting in front of children, that can create a dangerous situation. So speaking of that, just like with child abuse, just the rates and violence in our community are higher right now due to this situation, or potentially due to this situation. So even with domestic violence, we're seeing a huge spike in those numbers right now as well, which if there's children involved, that places children at risk of harm. So how we can recognize some signs of physical abuse, which again, this is something that we teach the community if kids are going to school or if they're going to a child care facility. Granted, that might be a difficult thing to recognize right now if you're just looking at children on the screen to where you can't see their full bodies. Or it might be that caregivers are hiding that by having children wear long sleeves or things like that. But still good information to know. So if you've had any access to kids or have kids in your families or have had any interactions with children, we know that children run and play and they can get injured by that sometimes. I know I've seen kids with just bruises on their elbows and their shins and their knees, and those are all normal, just part of being a child and just regular childhood play. But if you're seeing injuries that are just outside of those normal kind of scrapes and bumps that kids might see, if you're seeing a child on a screen, kind of like you're seeing me right now, and if they have any kind of injuries to like on their ears, on their cheeks, on their mouth, things like that, that's concerning for abuse. So we want to make sure that we're taking action with that. So any type of injuries that are just outside of the normal things that you see, right now is a particularly important time for us to pay attention to that and make sure that we're taking action if we notice something. If you're noticing any type of injuries where you can tell what the object of whatever they were hit with. So if you see belt marks or if you see kind of like those loop cords or anything that you can tell, like if it's a handprint or something like that, to where you can tell what the object was, those injuries don't happen accidentally. So we need to make sure that that's an opportunity for us to make a report. So again, just want to repeat, like having said that, it might be difficult for us to recognize that right now, but it's just something very important for us to pay attention to. So anytime we're having those digital conversations with children to where we're seeing them on video, just take an extra moment to like just kind of look around and see if you're noticing anything that's concerning. Okay, so with sexual abuse, that is any kind of conduct that's harmful to a child, or sexual conduct harmful to a child's mental, emotional, or physical welfare. So children, of course, cannot consent to any type of sexual acts. So any type of sexual act with a child is constituted as sexual abuse. So there are typically, we talked about signs of physical abuse that you can physically see. With sexual abuse, we're not going to be able to see any of those signs during this time, and really outside of this time, just physical signs of sexual abuse is not something that's very common. What we do see is just more symptoms of trauma. So anytime abuse occurs in the home, that is traumatic for children and families. And the way that children express trauma can be through a variety of behavioral marks. And then you can read on my screen, I won't go through and read all of these, some common emotional signs if a child is being sexually abused that they might be exhibiting. Now, if you're reading all of these right now, a lot of these signs that we're seeing that might be indications of sexual abuse could also be indications of a lot of other stressors in the home, particularly right now. So for example, if a child has new fears, I think right now it's very common for a child to have new fears because this is a very uncertain time in our hygiene. If you're noticing a lack of personal care or hygiene, that might be concerning if they're going to school and just a normal happy-go-lucky kid. I don't know if you guys right now, I think all of our personal care and hygiene is probably diminished since we're at home and we don't have to make as much effort. So a lot of these things might be attributed to just where we are in our country right now and just kind of that change in routine. And I think we're all as a nation are experiencing some sort of trauma just dealing with this very new stressful situation. But those are still things that we need to pay attention to with kids. And if we're noticing any type of behavioral changes or kind of unhealthy changes with children, regardless of what that might be, we need to make sure that we're asking questions and that we're providing support for those children. So if they're exhibiting new fears or having anger, hostility, or having problems sleeping or eating, regardless of what that might be, that's still concerning for us. So we want to make sure that we're providing support to those kids and are letting them know, like, hey, I've noticed that you're haven't been doing at school, or I've noticed, or in your online school, or I've noticed that you don't seem to be handling things well. So I think we just need to make sure that we're, hey, I've noticed this, and I want you to know that I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. It's very important. So again, like we talked about earlier, the important thing right now is to create situations for children, or to open that door of communication for children, to let them know that during this time there are trusted adults in your lives that really care about you and want to make sure that you're safe and protected, or just want to make sure that your emotional well-being is taken care of. I think that's a huge step to letting children know that if they need to to disclose some sort of abuse, that they have adults in their lives that are there for them. So again, providing support is extremely important right now for our children, but also for family members as well. So we really, this is so important. Please check in on families, especially families that might have some additional risk factors or just have young children in the home. So we really want to make sure that we come together as a community to really wrap our arms around children and families that need us at this time. We know that the risk factors for abuse are stressors in the family, and this is exactly where we are right now as a nation. So we want to make sure that we're providing as much support as possible, and little things go a huge way from that to make sure that we can create this or avoid having a family that hits that breaking point where they're being unsafe with a child. And little things could be, hey, mom with a young child, how about I call you once a week and we can just chat about all of your, you can tell me all the frustrating things your toddler did today, and I'm going to be here for you and I'm going to commiserate with you. It could be, hey, I know you have lots of kids in the home. I'm going to drop off some activities for them to do at your front porch. Or I'll bring you a meal, or I'll order you an Uber Eats. So any way that we can reach out on a regular basis to really provide that line of support for families that have children in their homes can make a life-changing difference right now. So we really encourage you to do that. And if you are just a community member that wants to support families that are not like a family member or a neighbor or a friend, there's a lot of resources in our community right now. So I think just sharing those resources with families that you serve can be very beneficial. So I know there's, again, I talked about earlier, I'm just so proud of our community for all of the action that they're taking to make sure that kids are safe and protected. So we want to make sure that we especially me as social workers or nonprofits, we probably know a lot of the resources that are available in our community, but some of our parents might not know that. So sharing those resources and letting them know that, hey, maybe if you don't have a grandparent or you don't have a supportive friend, we're here for you as a community. So just encouraging them to take advantage of those resources can be really huge. So I know, for example, I think I heard this on the news, ACH, Child and Family Services, somebody called them, a parent called them and just said, hey, I'm at my wit's end and I need your help. And they were able to help them. So shout out to any ACH folks that might be listening to this right now. I know we had a teenager that sent us an email via our website and described some abuse that she was experiencing, and we were able to step in and help her as well. So there's a lot of resources to make sure that children are safe and kids are protected. So we just need to make sure that we disseminate that information and make sure that parents that need our help know that there's resources out there for them. So if you need some resources or some are curious to see what those resources might be, we have, I don't know if you can see me circling right here. So if you go to our website at allianceforchildren.org/prevention, we have posted a lot of, first of all, educational content for parents, for families, or for community members. But we also have a list of kind of some of the external helplines, support lines that families can utilize during this time. And I promise this is not me doing a push to Alliance for Children to visit our websites. I think our goal right now is just to make sure that we're providing every resource possible for families that might need it. I would also encourage parents that you're working with right now. Right now is probably not a good time for you to be a super mom or super dad. We're all experiencing a stressful time. So just get through the day as much as you can. So if that means that you just order pizza for your child and don't provide like a nutritious meal for them, that's okay. I know I'm seeing right now on social media all of these motivational quotes about, hey, if you come out of this and you haven't learned a new language, or if you haven't started a new side hustle, whatever that might be, then you're doing something wrong. And that's just not true. And that's not a message that we want to send to families that are experiencing so much stress right now. So I think right now, if you're there with your child, and if you need a moment to step away, and if your child just sits there in front of the TV for a while so you can get a break, that's okay. So really encouraging parents to seek self-care and taking care of themselves at this time is just so much better for the children that they're caring for, to make sure that they have an adult in their lives that cares about their mental well-being. Creates a really safety barrier for children to make sure that parents are not hitting that threshold where they've had enough, and that creates an unsafe situation. So just really encourage parents and adults to seek self-care for themselves. And again, on our website, we have some resources for that as well. So establishing a routine is really important. That's important for us as service providers, but helping families create that routine can really be a safety factor as well, to help their stress level during this time. It might also be a good time to create a household safety plan. So if you're feeling that you're at your wit's end and you can't handle it anymore, here's a number that you can call. If you're feeling that there's another adult in the home that's unsafe for your child, here are some safety steps that we can take. And then really encouraging parents to have conversations with their children as well, and creating that empowerment with kids to make sure that they know what to do if they don't feel safe or if they're feeling stressed or have needs of themselves. So it's just really an important time for us all to come together. And I know we're doing that already, so I just encourage everybody to keep on doing that and including our families in that group effort to make sure that, that we're all in this together. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, right now is also a really good time to have some conversations with children about personal body safety and internet safety as well. I think that's an important topic to discuss right now because a lot of times kids are probably entertaining themselves online and using the internet. So we want to make sure that this is a safe place for them so they're not coming across something that might be really dangerous for them. So let's spend a few moments talking about how we can make sure, how we can have those conversations with children during this time. It's a really good time to take an opportunity to really establish some boundaries with kids. So for parents that are at home with their children and would like to talk about personal body safety, I know we have Alliance for Children that has programs where we go to schools and have conversations with children about personal body safety and ways that they can stay safe and report to adults. We stopped doing that after spring break. So there's a lot of children in a lot of schools and they didn't get to see that presentation this year. So this is a good opportunity for parents to really have those conversations. And the reason it's important is because research shows us that children who have some sort of understanding about personal body safety, what their private parts are a lot more likely to disclose if something does happen. I think we might take it for granted that children know, just naturally know what's okay and what's not okay. And that's not necessarily true. So we as safe caregivers really need to have those conversations with children so they know what's okay and what's not okay. And they have some action safety plans to know what to do if they're in an unsafe situation. So when we're having those conversations, some things that we want to include, we call it the 3 R's of personal safety. We want to make sure that kids recognize what is okay and what is not okay. So we want to teach them what their private parts are and that nobody's supposed to touch those private parts. And then just really having very specific examples of this is okay. If you go to the doctor and a doctor needs to check you, that's okay. But if there's another situation where a friend or somebody's asking to touch your private parts, that's not okay. So really teaching children to recognize that is important. We want to make sure that children know to say they're empowered to resist and say no and to get away. So having that conversation as part of teaching them about personal body safety. And then we want to make sure that we equip children to make sure that they know that they need to go tell a trusted adult if somebody is making them feel unsafe or if somebody's hurting them in any way. And really giving children many examples of some trusted adults. So if you don't feel comfortable talking to mom or dad about this, you can talk to your aunt, you can talk to your teacher, you can talk to just any trusted adult to make sure that kids know that they have the empowerment to, first of all, have the empowerment that they're in control of their bodies and can say no to unwelcome touches, and then report that to adults. So Jenny, I will pass it on to you. I'd like to show a video just to help you get started with that conversation. If you're just, man, I'm not comfortable with this, there's resources that we have for you.
Hi there! For your educational information today, I wanted to share about the importance of kids understanding and being able to recognize the difference between a welcome touch that they're okay with and an unwelcome touch, something that they are definitely not okay with. One of the resources that we have online is a worksheet that looks like this that helps kids understand and be able to identify what a welcome touch is and what an unwelcome touch is. As you'll see here at the bottom, there's a word bank with different kinds of touches, stuff like kick, hit, high five, hug, and kids themselves get to kind of decide where those touches should go. When we talk with our kids about welcome and unwelcome touches, it's important to really help them understand those clear and concrete examples of what would and what wouldn't be okay. So when we talk about welcome touches, we can tell them that those are things that do not make us feel sad, scared, or confused. Things like a high five, handshake, a fist bump, or a hug with people that we feel comfortable with. And an unwelcome touch, something that we're not okay with, would be things like hitting, kicking, or someone trying to look at or touch the private parts of our body. And be bold when you talk with kids. Explain really clear situations like, hey, when I help your baby brother change his diaper, use the bathroom or wipe for you, that's something that we don't really need to do. So having those clear examples with our children helps them understand. A big question that I get asked often is, what if you're at the doctor? So help our kids understand that when they're at the doctor, if that doctor is trying to make sure that those private parts are healthy and safe, that's okay, that's welcome. But we shouldn't be alone with the doctor. Mom and dad or the guardian should be in the room with that doctor and that child to help them feel more comfortable and just to make sure that everything's okay. For more information on how to have these conversations with your kids, or for more information about some great resources out there to read to your kids, please continue to visit our Alliance for Children website or join us again on Facebook or Instagram. We will be including a lot of educational information in these coming weeks. Stay safe and remember, wash your hands.
Love it. Okay.
So that was our lovely Carol Logan, who is our community engagement supervisor, and she was previously our community educator, so she went to schools and talked to children about this exact topic. So all of the resources that Carol was referencing can be found right here. So we have just lots of resources to help you. Oh, hold on. I'm not sure if you guys saw my screen over here. Now you should be able to. So there's lots of educational videos to help you start that conversation with children in a more child-friendly, just fun way versus making it like an awkward conversations about the birds and bees. So hopefully there's some good resources there for you. There's also children books that you can read. These are 4 that we recommend. And we're actually reading these children's books on our Facebook page. So if you want to check that out, you're welcome to do that. But these are just some good ways to help start that conversation and really going beyond just talking about these are your private parts. Don't let anybody touch it. But just really having very specific examples about grooming dynamics and how we can approach that with children and just some really action steps to make sure kids know what to do if they feel unsafe. Okay, so we talked about earlier, it's also a very important time to have some conversations about internet safety as well. So rather than me telling you about that, let's see if this video will work and we'll hear Carol talk about that.
Hi there. My name is Carol Logan and I am the Community Engagement Supervisor at Alliance for Children. During this social distancing time, I know many of us are spending more time on social media, on the internet, and I'm sure our kids are as well. So I thought I would just hop on really quick and share 4 very simple rules that you can talk to your kids about as they use the internet over the next few weeks. The first one is really, really simple, but so very important, and that is to not give out personal information like name, address, and phone number when they're online. This is especially important when it comes to social media and online games. A great idea is to set clear guidelines of what is okay and what is not okay. For example, many parents allow their kids to talk to strangers in games just about the game, how to get to the next level, how to do this in the game, how to do that in the game. However, if that person that they're talking to tries to start talking about personal things, we want our kids to go to an adult and come and tell us about that. Along those same lines, we want our kids to understand that they should never meet a stranger from the internet. And if a stranger is asking to meet with them, they need to come to us. We want to reassure them that they would not be in trouble. We just want to help keep them safe. Not only do we want kids not giving out personal information, we want them to understand that if they see something or if someone tries to show them something that makes them feel scared, sad, or confused or uncomfortable, to come to us and tell us about it. Again, we want to reassure them that we would not be upset with them, that we're not going to take away the game or the app that they were on, that we just want to help them feel better and teach them how to block and report those things that they may see. Now, if you have older teens, we need to help them understand what is okay to post online and what is not okay, ensuring that they're not posting anything inappropriate online. A great thing to talk with our kids about is to share news articles or stories where you see kids getting into trouble for posting inappropriate content. That way, it's not us shaking our fingers at our kids, telling them what not to do. We're giving them the opportunity to say, hey, this is what we saw happening in the world. What do you think about this? What could these kids have done to stay out of trouble? And finally, let's talk to our kids about being kind online. Usually when we talk about cyberbullying, we focus on what to do if our kid is the one that's being cyberbullied. And that is really important. But we also need to encourage kids to not be the cyberbully themselves and what it means to stand up for other people if they see it happening online. While I hope these rules help to keep our kids a little bit safer, I also hope we're able to use this time to connect with our kids over a board game, a movie, a walk around a non-crowded neighborhood. We also can play Minecraft or Fortnite with our kids and have them show us how it works, or learn some of those TikTok dances. For more resources on how to talk to your kids about personal safety and online safety, please visit alliancefordchildren.org/prevention. Stay healthy and safe, and be sure to wash your hands.
Okay. Well, I'm getting some text messages that the video glitched a little bit, but that everybody heard the volume or the audio of that. So at the very least, you got some opportunity to hear from somebody else other than myself today. But again, I really encourage you to have some conversations about online safety with children, particularly if you are like a lot of us, to where maybe you're working from home and don't necessarily have the opportunity to constantly be monitoring what kids are doing online. Just empowering them to have those conversations is really important. So lastly, in our last 10 minutes that we have together, it is very important that if you suspect that abuse is occurring, that you make a report to make sure that kids are safe and protected. I know a lot of times when our investigators that investigate child abuse with our detectives and DFPS caseworkers, they're called the frontline staff members or first responders, and that is true, but I really consider that people that make reports are really those first responders, because we wouldn't be able to investigate cases to protect children unless we have caring adults that really take that courageous action to make sure that they report abusive situations with children. So it's very, very important to do that. So legally speaking, all of us as adults, it doesn't matter what your profession is, it doesn't matter what your relationship to the child is, we're all mandated reporters. So if you are an adult, 18 or older, you're legally obligated to make sure that you report any suspicions of abuse. There are 3 main reasons that we want to make sure that a report is made. Number one, if a child makes a disclosure or makes an outcry to you that they're unsafe or they've been abused in any way, we have to make a report. And it's really not, you don't have to do an investigation. You don't have to confirm that this is something that you believe if a child is saying, or that this is actually 100% true. Anytime a child is telling you that they're unsafe in their environment or they have been abused, we have to make sure that we make a report. If you notice that something is happening, or if somebody tells you like, hey, my neighbor told me that something happened with somebody else, if you get those kind of like secondhand knowledge that a child might be unsafe, that's something that we need to make sure that we're taking action to report as well. So if you're noticing marks or injuries on children, if you're noticing anything where they're unsafe in their environment or unsafe with a particular person, we need to make sure that we report. And that's pretty black and white. If you know a child is unsafe, if a child told you they're unsafe, obviously we have to take action. I think where we see that people have some hesitation is if they're just suspect that something is going on, but are not 100% positive that something is happening. And in those cases, that's okay for you to still make a report. You don't have to be 100% sure that abuse is happening. You just have to suspect that abuse is happening. So in Texas, we have what we call a good faith report, to where if you're making a report just based on the safety of a child because you believe that something is happening, there's no repercussions if it turns out that child was safe and there was some sort of misunderstanding. We always encourage to err on the safety of a child. So if you suspect something and you're not sure, go ahead and make a report. And your information will be confidential. So CPS or DFPS is not going to say, hey, so-and-so made a report and they think that you're a child abuser. That's not going to happen. Your information is always kept confidential. So don't worry about that aspect of that. But just we really want to make sure that, especially during this time to where there might be limited eyes and ears on children, we want to make sure that if adults have any sort of suspicion, if you're just going home at night and you're just scared for the safety of a child in a particular environment, go ahead and make that report. It's just really important right now. And I know in my bio, and I've kind of mentioned that, I worked for Child Protective Services for a number of years, and I worked at a children's advocacy center where we really handled kind of more severe cases. And when I was working for CPS, most of my cases would be the really severe cases where most of the time I would be responding to Cook Children's Hospital. So shout out to any Cook Children's staff here. But I'd be responding on Cook Children's Hospital to where it was really serious injury that required a hospital visits at that time. And anytime I would do an investigation, we would always call counselors or teachers or anybody that had recent contact with the child, and we would ask, hey, have you had any concerns or suspicions that abuse was occurring? And great majority of the time, there would be trusted adults, well-meaning adults that had all kinds of suspicions, but they just weren't sure. And a lot of times it would be cases to where that parent otherwise seemed to be a great person, or they would be really nice, or there was somebody that that adult had a good relationship with and they didn't want to ruin that relationship or didn't want to make a report based on a suspicion. And really that resulted in further trauma to that child, to where it resulted in a situation where that child had to go to the hospital when it could have been prevented way before that. So on that story, I think that's just very important that if you see suspicions, we make reports. And based on kind of just trends in abuse, we know that if abuse happens once, it's typically continuous and happens multiple times. And if it's continuous abuse, it tends to escalate and get worse and worse. So we need to make sure that we're really standing as that line of defense for our child. And you might be the only person that's that line of defense that's able to make a report. So just encourage you to do that. And there's multiple ways that you can make a report. So there's a 1-800 hotline that you can call. You can see that right here, 252-5400. That's a CPS hotline, and you might just call that line. You'll probably be on hold for a while, but that's okay. So, and they'll just sounds like a scary thing to do, but the process of that is fairly simple. So somebody will answer the phone and they'll just ask you questions about what your concerns are, and any other periphery information that they might need at that time. You can also make a report online at texasabusehotline.org. You can make a report online in situations where that child is not in immediate danger. So maybe they were abused by grandpa years ago, but they don't have any contact with grandpa anymore. We still want to make sure we report that. But if you just have situations to where that child is not in immediate danger, that's okay to make a report online. But if a child still has access to their perpetrator, or if it's a recent something that happened, we want to make sure that we're calling versus making reports online. Simply because for that online reports, it takes sometimes several days for that report to hit a caseworker's desk load to where they're going out to investigate. And you can always call law enforcement as well. So you can call 911 or you can call local jurisdiction. So there's lots of ways for us to make sure that we're taking action. The important thing is that we're taking action if we suspect that something is occurring. So beyond this presentation, so I know this presentation focused specifically on how we can make sure kids are safe during this time of stay shelter at home. But beyond that, we really encourage our community, as always. I know April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, so we're really doing a lot of pushes to make sure that our community is engaged and is taking action to prevent abuse. But beyond that, it's just important to do that to make sure kids are protected. So any awareness that we can spread, any tips or information that we can share about this topic really increases the safety of children in our community. Because when we have conversations about this, we make it easier for children to disclose if something is happening. We make it easier for communities to know what to do if a child is unsafe, and therefore we're making it harder for abusers to be able to abuse children during this time or any time at all. So we have a lot of trainings that we offer, so check out our website if you just want to learn more information. And then share resources. So I know there's a lot of nonprofit organizations or just community members that are kind of in this fight to end child abuse. So anything that you can do to support those organizations like Alliance for Children or ACH or CASA or any of our nonprofits in the area, Gladney as well. So anything that you can do to stand alongside us and help us in that action, I think really makes a difference. So sharing on social media is a great way to do that. And I think I have 4 minutes left, but that is all I have for today. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me or just call me. Well, right now is not a good time to call me because I'm not in office, so email would be best if you have any specific questions. But I think we have time to take some questions right now if y'all have any.
Yes, we have a few that were taken online, so or put up online, so I will be sure to ask those real quick. And then if anybody else has other questions, I will open it up. I'll unmute you guys if you want to talk, or if you just want to put it in the chat, you can do it that way. The first one comes from Miss Nikki Carroll. She's asking to please speak to some safety precautions that can be implemented since there's a spike in domestic violence during this season. Would you be able to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, domestic violence is not our area of expertise, but I think those same precautions that we can take place as far as providing support to children or to families in general can make a big difference. So I think similar with child abuse, domestic abuse tends to spike in times of stress. And right now we're having a lot of family members that are together and are coping up how to be together 24/7. So that of course creates some stressors. So I think again, if we can provide any type of support, small support, I think makes a big difference, such as making phone calls, stopping by, checking in on people, and again, having that line of communication to where, hey, mom, if you're unsafe with your spouse or whoever that might be, I'm here for you, and here's some ways that you can reach out and I'll take action.
Perfect. Another question comes from Stacy Main. In the gymnastic cases, the doctor was abusing the girls with the parents in the room. How do we talk to our kids about that? Like, what is the line that we use?
Yeah, and I think that is that's happening with other people watching. But you're right, this was a situation to where several children even made outcries to their parents, and those parents just didn't believe that that happened, that with somebody else watching. So I think this is just an important time to have those empowerment conversations with children, to where this is okay, this is not okay, and anytime you're in a situation to where something inappropriate is happening, or something that we talked about, this is not okay, and if that's happening, come tell me about that. So in that particular case, there were children that did tell their parents, but it was just such an unbelievable thing that those parents didn't take action. So I think just the other lesson from that, if you're a parent and your child tells you, hey, I feel uncomfortable, or I don't want to go to this doctor anymore because I don't like him, or I don't want to go to the babysitter's house, or if they just any type of reactions, rather than dismissing that as like, oh, they just don't like to eat vegetables at this person's house, whatever that might be, or they don't like their big dog. Anytime a child tells us they're feeling uncomfortable, or if they're like a lot of times kids, instead of just saying, hey, so and so is abusing me, they'll kind of test the waters and see how you might respond to that. So anything small that they tell you, such as I don't like this person, or they're making me feel uncomfortable, we need to make sure that we're not dismissing that and that we're taking action. But with that, making sure that kids know that they can come to us, and know what's okay and what's not okay.
Perfect. And then, and in the unlikely case that something is happening right in front of a parent's eyes, what is something that you could say or do, or how should you respond in that situation?
Oh gosh, that's well, really put a stop to that, right? But don't break any laws while you do that.
Yeah,
and
right.
then immediately report, absolutely. And I think in situations to where like something just happened, it might be best to call 911 or to call law enforcement, in addition to CPS, so they can take that immediate action, is really important.
Perfect. Okay, there's another question. This is coming from somebody that works in the school setting. What do you suggest we do for instances where certain families are high need, such as they've had previous CPS involvement, hygiene concerns, etc., and there has been no contact since school has been closed? If a CPS report were to be made, would this be simply based on a wellness check?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I know a lot of schools, I think it was Irving ISD, to where if they're not having contact with those high-risk families, they're actually going to visit. I know that's not a possibility for everybody, but are there external people that we can go, that we can utilize to check up on those kids? So like, had they ever been to therapy before? Like, can we have that therapist call and check up on them? And yes, you can certainly request welfare checks as well. I think law enforcement does those a lot. I don't know that CPS would.
Perfect. Okay, that's all the questions I'm seeing from our chat. Let me open it up. Do you guys have any other questions for Katia? I'm gonna unmute you guys. If you want to stay muted, you can definitely mute yourself. Let me see. How do I do that? Maybe. Oh, there we go. Okay. So those of you that have questions, feel free to unmute yourself. You have that control right now, and you can ask a question, or you can continue to put those in the chat for Katia. One question, do you have the PowerPoint in Spanish? Uh-oh. Katia, we can't hear you. Hold on just a second.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Yes. If you'll just start over for us. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have it in Spanish right now, but we do have the ability to create that and to recreate it in Spanish. So if that's a need that we have, we can certainly do that.
Oh, cool. Perfect. Awesome. And then a follow-up question to the question we had previously. So a wellness check would be through CPS or law enforcement. You're basically saying law enforcement can do those wellness checks. CPS is only going to investigate and do a check if there's abuse that's deemed investigatory, my word.
That would be my answer. If there's any other experts that are here you guys are unmuted. So if you have other advice, would appreciate that as well.
Any other questions you guys have? We're getting a lot of praise for you. I think this was great. This was very applicable, especially, you know, for the time that we're in. A lot of good resources, a lot of good, like what to do, how to kind of talk with students, you know, virtually, and how to keep them safe and what to look for. So I think this is great for all of us right now. Thank you so much, Katia.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. Thank you for this opportunity.
I have one more. This comes from Ms. Mallory Rogers. As a therapist to kiddos, I have some parents that feel unsafe with their kids that are prone to aggressive behavior. In this case, is having the parent call 911 the best option for the parent to protect them from harming the child in self-defense? Good question.
Yes, I think so. I think that's certainly an opportunity for law enforcement to get involved. Yeah, because that wouldn't be a child abuse issue, so it's not a child protective services situation, but law enforcement can certainly help with that.
Perfect. Also preventing that parent from, you know, hurting the child out of frustration.
Yes, sure. Yeah. Well, it sounds like a therapist is involved, so thankful for that. I know you can do a lot with that prevention as well.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Any other questions? We'll give it about 1 more minute if you guys want to type, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. If you guys have questions that you think of later, feel free to email us. All of her information is right there in the PowerPoint if you want to jot that down. This is also recorded, and so you will be able to watch it again, share it with other people. Alliance is very, very proactive and very passionate about getting all of this information out to our community. So they're open to that. And then also we will be making sure that this is on our Facebook page. So if you guys want to host your own watch party, that's been kind of something that's popping up lately on social media, which is pretty fun. So you can't actually be in person with your friends and watch a movie or a show or anything like that, but you can definitely host that watch party, which is pretty cool. And so if you want to do this as an agency, just as a friend group, as a anything like that, feel free to do that. And that would be kind of cool just to kind of see how that butterfly effect and how that information can kind of get out to more people in different areas. So that's another option for you guys. But if there's no more questions, we will end it. And we are so very thankful, Katia. Thank you so much.